Recording.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen, or at least my deck. There we go. And can you confirm you're seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes, we see it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so thanks everyone for tuning in. Your morning my time, evening your time, and we're going to be going over some pretty cool things related to Power BI. Before we get into the topic of what we'll be actually discussing, as far as the demonstration and presentation goes, let me give you a little background about myself, for those not familiar. So I've been in the BI industry now for about 8 years. I've owned my own business for the last 6 and been running full-time under my own company for about the last 3. And I do a lot of focus on modeling and design, and specifically kind of aesthetics. You might kind of see the name, the VizWiz there. It's a nickname that's been affectionately given to me by some other industry colleagues of mine a couple of years ago that I found like stuck very well. So more recently, I ended up creating a persona of that with the little avatar you see in the upper left of the visualization wizard. That's very prolific on my YouTube channel. But I found that it's just a specialty that a lot of people seem to not be leaning very heavily into, where you might have really good reports, really good data models, but the problem is that it's the right visuals aren't being used, or it's just not particularly aesthetically pleasing. So it's, it just doesn't look like a designer or an artist really took any pass on it to make it look appealing from a visual standpoint. So that's kind of where I've leaned into heavily to really help to make sure that reports not only are effective and have good data, but they look good. They have a bit of design that's gone into them and thought that's gone into the colors, the layouts, the all of those little elements that really just give it that extra polish. But for today, we're going to be talking about a lot of demos and little tips and tricks that I've learned when it comes to kind of upgrading and creatively using the native tool sets that you have in Power BI and clever ways to create solutions that are unique and can give different perspectives and also provide very interesting solutions to stuff. Let me turn that off. So while what I would recommend is that, or what I'll say is that we're not going to be able to go through every single one of these. This is a presentation that is scaled up and down from all the way up to an hour and a half down to 30 minutes, depending on the length of time. I'm going to be spending between about 30 to 45 minutes going through these materials, so we'll probably get through about half of these or so. But you'll still learn a lot of really cool stuff related to many of the techniques that you see in front of us here. And a lot of these as well are also videos that I have provided on YouTube. So I will also be linking you at the end with our references page, where you'll be able to go watch some supplemental material as well on my YouTube channel. So let's go ahead and get started. And I will go into my first demo. So that's actually, give me a sec, I'm going to switch my shared screens. Go over, share, and this one. Perfect. All right. And you can see the Power BI desktop?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to do a quick check just to make sure when I switch between them. Okay, so perfect. What this has in front of us here is this is actually a really unique perspective to be able to take with a line visual that we have here in this report page. And I'm going to test one thing out. Normally I'm presenting my whole screen out of portion. So when I zoom in right now, do you actually see the zoomed screen or not?
No.
Okay. So zoom it doesn't work when I'm sharing an application. Cool. Just making sure. One other just quick check. Do you see the drawing that I put onto the screen, or is that also not shared?
No. No, we
okay.
Don't see the drawing. No.
Good to know. Teams won't capture the Zoom It tool when I'm sharing applications. All right. So I will make sure to indicate with my mouse then. All the dots that you see on here, the formatting kind of KPI points that are on the line itself, that's not something that you can add natively to a line chart in Power BI. It's something that kind of, I would say I stumbled across almost like a happy accident. I was doing some development and I ended up starting development of a different chart and ended up switching over to this. And the nice thing with Power BI is you actually, if I select this here, you have the ability to be able to navigate between any of these and really easily change from one visual to another. So it actually started on a clustered column chart and then ended up having this switch over to a line chart later, which allowed these dots to show up. So what I mean by the fact that you can actually conditionally format a line chart, if I was to come over to the format painter and go down to data colors, you'll notice that there's no f of x symbol right here. That is something that normally shows up as a symbol when you can apply any type of conditional formatting to the visual that you have in Power BI, and that's just non-existent here. However, if you were actually to come over and start as a clustered column chart, you can see that the colors are showing up in the bars, and these symbols are down at the bottom. Let me clear that out for you so you can see. That little f of x symbol means I can apply some type of conditional formatting logic. I'm going to Control Z to put that back. There we go. So if I open this up here, the logic itself isn't as important. I basically just can apply some type of logic, provide color KPIs, and if I had started on this visual and then switch over to the line chart, what that does is then it basically turns the color formatting into dots that show up onto the line itself. So let me back. There you go, a couple of times to get it to reset to that. And this was one thing that when I first discovered it, it's one of those things where it kind of creates or fosters the question of, is this a bug or is this a feature? And with anytime you come across one of these things or anytime you're implementing something, you want to make sure to actually confirm is it safe to deploy. It's a similar conversation around preview features. Power BI has a lot of preview features you can toggle on, as it has continuous releases, but some of those you may be wanting to be cautious when, actually deploying it in any way, because you don't want it to break, you don't want it to be buggy, and you don't want it to change unexpectedly on the end user. Same thing with this. When I first discovered it, I thought it was a great way to, again, add some additional KPIs onto the line, but I also didn't want to deploy it and then, let's say 1 or 2 months later, I have an end user come up to me and tell me that basically this disappeared or it stopped working. I don't want this to go away. So I actually I emailed Microsoft. I checked with them on the feature, and it's while they didn't originally have this their intention was not to actually have this as a feature. It's been deployed enough and enough people use it that they do not plan on removing it. It's been in here for a couple of years now. There's no plan for this to actually disappear at any point. In a perfect world, it would be nice to kind of be able to configure it from here or to change the size of the dots, a few other configurations, because you're basically left with the size. At least it's stable and it's reliable. It's not going to break. It's not going to disappear, and it's there, permanently kind of moving forward. If you do need to adjust it as a developer, you basically come back, you start from a different visual, you configure it from this one if you need to change the rules, and then basically turn it back into the line visual. So there's a couple of steps, and again, it's why it's somewhat of a hidden feature, but it definitely can add valuable additional insights, especially when you're wanting to create those bands where you want to see the section where the green is, and you can see the upper, middle, and lower bands, or any callouts that you're wanting to point out on the line visual. A couple of other ones that I want to show as part of this demo as well. The analytics pane is something that I think is an invaluable part of a lot of visuals in Power BI, especially the line visual. I think it can add a lot of value with, as you can see here, the trend line and also the forecast line. There's a new one recently as well that showed up that we'll see in another demo, but I just want to show you the analytics pane and how easy it is to use, just to enlighten you on how much extra value you can gain with just a few clicks from adding on those things to the page. So I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly delete all of the lines that I had. There we go. Yeah, so standard line chart without anything. Trend line, again, it's a snap of a finger turning it on, and you've immediately gone from, honestly, this is pretty hard to tell that there's any trend in general. There's a lot of volatility in the data, and for the most part, it kind of looks flat, but this does indicate to us that there's a ever so slight trend upwards overall when you average throughout the data. So it's not a lot, but it's still giving you a little bit of extra insight in the information that you're looking at. Similarly with the forecast, it's a standard forecast algorithm that gets added into there. You could click at and you choose to have a few different data points to adjust by. 10 points is something important to note. When you have it at points, it basically goes out this many points from whatever the data points are that are shown on here. Right now, each of these data points is month and year, so it's going out 10 months. If I had a hierarchy controls at the top, and I was navigating between year, quarter, month, and date, that would be 10 points at the, so 10 years at the year level, 10 quarters at the quarter level, and so on down the list. If you want to fix it to a specific date period, like I always want it to be 6 months forward, you can just simply specify the actual date period forward you want it to go, and then that fixes it to a rolling window attached to that. So it just depends, again, like whether or not you have a hierarchy at that point. I found that points can sometimes get very long. If you are projecting 10 years down to 10 days, depending on which level you are, that to me, that variability seems just, it doesn't really work for the forecast. So I usually fix it to a single period, whether or not it's any of these values in here. You can even do actually hours, minutes, and seconds if you have data that is down at the time level. A few other things just important to note as well is whether or not you actually ignore the last couple of months. This is really nice for people who have open and closed months. If the data is volatile and changing a lot during an open period, let's say current month of data, and you want to skip that, you can say ignore last, say 1 month. And what they'll do is they'll take the line and that will skip it from the current month back to the prior. So it's basically forecasting only based off of like closed periods now. So it helps to remove some of the potentially maybe inaccurate data that you otherwise would want to avoid out of that forecast calculation. And then if, as needed, if you wanted to, you can add some points of seasonality into here rather than automatic if you wanted to add some variation based on how the historical seasonality was being calculated. Very last thing as part of this demo, then I'll open it up for questions. One of my favorite features that came out recently, maybe not as recently anymore, but came out in the last year or so for Power BI is the option to have visual header tooltips that we have here at the top. It's a beautiful way to add basically helper text. I just have some automatically generated text in there, but what you have is the ability to guide users and explain to them what the data is telling them. What kind of visual is this, and what does the visual tell you? So any explanation that's needed to help users understand what they're looking at or to explain maybe some insights about the data can be included directly in the visual. Previously, this used to be much more of a headache where you would have to do this through bookmarks and a lot of hidden visuals and creating pop-ups all over the page. And it was possible, but it was painful somewhat to make, and it required a lot of maintenance and things could break easily. This is very easy to add. However, I will mention the fact that I find the way to turn it on somewhat buried in a menu. So that's always been, to me, one of the frustrating parts of this. So to actually get the visual header tooltip to turn on, you first have to come all the way down to visual header down here. Then you have to scroll all the way down. There you go. And the visual header tooltip icon down here, that has to be turned on. And like that's what doesn't make sense to me is this having to toggle this on or off, like no other menu in the Power BI format settings is conditional to have to go to one menu first, toggle something, and then have the menu show up. Like every other menu in here, if you want to turn it on or off, the on and off switch is located right in the header. Like, so it's always been a head scratcher for me. It's like, why is visual header tooltip not just have an on or off switch like right over here to allow, basically to toggle this? It's, it goes against all other design practices that they've had everywhere else. So I think a lot of people don't even realize this exists because it is not only in this menu, it is buried at the very bottom to even turn on and understand what that does. But once you turn that on, as you can see, icon isn't showing. You enable that, icon shows up. And then by default, you have a couple of limitations. The standard tooltip text is 250 characters or less. So basically you can just type in whatever you want up to 250 characters. There's no rich text formatting, so you can't italicize, spaced, individually increase or decrease font sizes for individual words. It's basically just you have it at the tooltip level. I can change the color, text size, font, background, but that's for the entire tooltip itself, not any individual words. If I need longer, if I need text to be longer, or I want to do more customization than is available natively, I can go instead and I can assign it to a tooltip page. That's just typically a hidden page that you have built where you've specified that as a report tooltip. I have one over here built where I basically just created this page. The page, by the way, very easy to set up as a report tooltip. All I need to do is, just as an example, create a new page, come over to the format painter, and simply select page information. You turn tooltip on, and then page size. you just need to make sure that it's set to tooltip, which is a width of 320 by 240 pixels, because it renders it at the size it is. If you had a tooltip that was 1920 by 1080, when it pops up on your page, it's going to be gigantic. It would fill your whole page. So the tooltip size is 320 by 240 by default. Basically about 3 settings, and then you customize it. It is a small page that you can add a text box to. You can add an image to it. You can put a visual on here if you wanted to. I'm making this clean and simple. I added a text box that allows me to have more characters in here. And now, if I wanted to, I could also bold, I could underline, I could italicize. So I have a lot of options to configure this as I need to. And then, the end result is now I can basically take this page, attach it to my visual header, and then I'm given a richer text box with more customization that also has a longer character limit. Both accomplish a goal. It just depends. Do you want a simple, short and sweet tooltip text? Do you want something a bit more rich and robust, maybe with a longer explanation? But either way, it attaches itself to the visual, and it's kept clean and neatly in the visual header with a nice little icon that shows up to indicate that, hey, there's information that when you hover over me, you will get some something to explain. With those 3, though, are there any questions on the conditional formatting dots that we had on the line, the analytics pane discussion, or the visual header tooltip?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. I will go to the next one. Let me stop sharing my screen, and I will share the next screen. There we go. All right. This is one of my favorite, more recent ones that I did. There was a new visual, an add-on to a visual that came out in like September or so this year, called the narrative, smart narrative visual. Basically, it's a text box that allows you to add KPIs into it. So you see that I have a tooltip here. And as I hover and change, notice that the values inside of that tooltip changed too. Total sales was 35,000. It was 8,000 for this month, or 71,000, etc. So not only do I have a visual that's changing, a title that's changing, I've used a lot of different elements to create a very unique tooltip card to pop up as I'm hovering over all of these different spots on the visual itself, rather than a standard tooltip, which is just a series of strings of texts, one after the other. So lots of really cool ways to kind of customize and provide very unique design elements and solutions to tooltips. And what I love about the smart narrative is that it provides natural language descriptions or explanations for people who maybe just want to kind of read a summary of their information rather than having to, say, look at a visual or a card. So let me go kind of walk you through this report tooltip page. Not that one. Nope, keep going. There it is. Okay, perfect. And let's see if I can actually, because I can't zoom in at the moment. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger for you. If you've never used this before, by the way, this is a very useful section up in the view tab. So page view, actual size. Right now, that is basically showing me the actual size of the tooltip. So that's the size it's going to be, when I hover over on a page. So like it's that size that you just saw is this. That is the size of the page. But if you want it to be, fit to the page, you can do that instead. But I would recommend when you are creating a tooltip, it's often good to actually have actual size on there to give you a perspective of how big is this tooltip going to be in my other page. If you do this, you've set it to say 600 by 400, maybe, and it's filling up a large portion of your screen. It's going to be filling up a large portion of your screen when it's actually attached to a visual of yours as well. So it gives you good perspective. But obviously for this demonstration, it's kind of nice right now to have it bigger so I can have it fill my screen and you can also see it easier. But we have a few different elements on here. I'm kind of going to start from the top down and walk through some unique out-of-the-box solution for a couple of these. So the first thing that I'm actually going to show you is the title at the top. This is actually something I'm using, which is a button. Notice that if you see over in the visualizations pane, there's a bunch of different options that are over here for formatting and everything. And the button text is actually one of the primary reasons that I like this visual so much. With a button, by default, you basically, it's designed to be clicked. It's designed to be used for a bookmark or a web URL link or anything else. And you typically have like, go to web page or you have some information like this here where it's normally a button that people would click on. But the nice thing about this is, and this is the only visual for whatever reason that can show text or numbers, where you can choose the alignment, you can choose the left to right horizontal alignment, top to bottom. It's like, I don't understand why the single value card does not have this, but it's really nice that on this visual that I have flexibility to be able to choose basically where I want to include the text on the button itself. So let me Control Z back a few times and get my original text. And the other nice thing, one more time, there we go, is with a lot of spots in Power BI, whenever you see this f of x symbol, this thing here, so I'm going to clear that. So I can either type in static text, or I can click the f of x symbol and I can supply into the title a field value. So that's a measure that can be put into there. And that's actually what I have right now in this button. If I go back to that page, then I'm going to show you the name of it, and then I will show you the measure itself. I am formatting by field value, meaning basically a value from the field over here, essentially a measure that is returning some text string. And I have a measure called Smart Narrative Title. I'm going to go ahead and open up my measures folder and look for title. The nice thing about this is I can zoom in. Even if I can't zoom in on my screen, I can make this a little bit bigger. There you go. And this is just a simple concatenation. It's brand with a space, followed by, and I'm basically just min, max, doesn't matter. I'm basically just grabbing the first value for the brand name and class, and then the first value for class name. And what's happening is when I'm hovering, because I'm grabbing, like max brand name, max class name, and again, min, max wouldn't really matter, because whenever I'm hovering over my elements on this page, there's only one value being returned. When I hover over this green section, it's returning brand Contoso, class Deluxe. There's only one brand and one class in this specific element that I'm hovering over when the filter is being passed through. So again, that's why min and max doesn't matter that much. But I'm basically now returning just a clean concatenated title that clearly indicates what filters I have applied. I'll just give you another example here. Brand Fabricum and class Regular. So basically just it creates a nice little title box at the top to make sure that it's understood what they're hovering over in case there's any ambiguity, or to avoid misunderstanding about any potential filters that may or may not be getting applied to the data that they're looking at. So that's the title that I have, and I think it's a great example of some of the unique ways you can use a button. Again, there's other things you could have done with it as well. You could have used a single value card, but the thing that I like about buttons that I don't understand why the single value card in Power BI has is the fact that I can choose my alignment. If I wanted my title to be left aligned, easy. I don't have to do any clever formatting. I don't have to layer visuals on top of each other. I just click left aligned. I've asked Microsoft repeatedly, single value card, it's center aligned by default. Please give us the options to customize it. But the button is a surprisingly good, versatile visual for a lot of different uses in Power BI that I've utilized it for because of how many formatting options there are available for it. And basically I just have the action turned off. There's no need to click it. So it's just there as a placeholder to show the title at the top. But the main point of this demo is the fact that I'm wanting to show the smart narrative visual in front of us. So a few things in here that I've done. Basically all of this stuff is just typed in, like this standard text. This is something that's really easy to add. So there's actually a hidden trick in Windows. If you hold the Windows key and press semicolon, it actually pops up an emoji keyboard, and you search for something like money. Here's the emojis related to money. So for all of you over there, where's the pound? There's the euro. So yeah, I can put in the euro banknote if I want, because that's an emoji. That's part of the emoji keyboard set, and basically just typed it in there. I think it provides just a little bit of aesthetic flair, and to me, it's one way to help indicate this is essentially a metric that I'm looking at. Here's another metric. So I try to to throw them in here and there. It helps break up the text, kind of segment it a little bit, and provide natural breaking points between the lines. It's of course absolutely not necessary, but I think it looks a little bit better than just simply plain unformatted text. It's the same reason that what I do is to help call out metric titles, I bold those. Anytime that I have a value that I'm returning from the model, I'm underlining that. So that's why all of these are underlined. This, by the way, is simply just total sales. So I'm actually going to delete that and I'll show you how to add it. So I want to include total sales from my model. It's a calculation that I have. So I'm going to click select value here. And I want to say total sales. All right, there we go, total sales. Perfect. And then for current month. And look at that. You could it basically uses Q&A for or the natural language query in Power BI to search up things. It's fun. As a developer, I don't want to have to type in and ask it to find my information. Like honestly, can't you just give me a list over here like this where I can just drag and drop my fields that I want into this. Like that's what I'm hoping it gets to. I would love to be able to just do this and put my measure into there and have it calculate that. So I think there's been a lot of feedback to Microsoft to say, hey, simply just let us use our fields and just drop into wells. So hopefully that's coming. This works okay sometimes. I've also found it occasionally not find the measure unless you search for the exact name. So for like longer calculations, like you basically have to, I honestly just copy and paste the measure name into there to get it to show up. But the cool part is I don't actually have a measure for current month. There you go. This is actually calculated. It's taking my measure and it is basically applying a date filter to it. And that's something that it's generating in there. So it can create calculations for you, but again, as a developer, I would rather just do it myself in the model. So hopefully that comes out soon. It's also one thing that's recommended to do is name your values because you have the list of values you've used in a smart narrative visual in here. So at any point it's just good practice to sales for current month, use camel case or something like that. Click save. There you go. And you can see that it is showing up in here. And then again, I underline mine. And it's basically a rinse and repeat for the rest of them. You just search for the measure or the name of the measure that you want for the model, and it will inject those into there. And because these are measures basically being rendered in this visual, just like the title button is doing, those also pass through any of the filter context. So that's why that changes as well. So you can basically combine static text descriptions with dynamic text strings and have a really nice, clean, formatted design to give you a really interesting way to kind of tell a story through narration rather than a visual itself. A couple of other things that I want to mention in here. Let's see. Yes, this visual down at the bottom. So what we have in front of us is a visual that I've actually really liked, which is it's a bullet chart that actually is allowing me to do a comparison of a total versus a subtotal. And it's one unique way that I've discovered to kind of be able to compare a grand total versus a part. So it looks better and it makes more sense when you are experiencing it from the filtered selection. But as an example, when I hover over this, what you're actually seeing is that blue bar that you're seeing in there versus any of these selections. Like maybe this is a great example of a smaller one. So that for Contoso, you're getting basically the value of this filtered amount versus the value for the entire column for basically all classes. So it allows you to see the ratio of subtotal versus grand total, which is very unique. And that's one thing that I've like to do to add as kind of just an extra way to just look at the data and give it a different perspective. So in here, it's it's a good example of using a custom visual. So this is the Smart Narrative Bullet Chart by OKViz that is from the Visual Store. So I'm going to show you that in here. There you go. So it's a really, and also OKViz is probably one of my, one of my favorite visuals from visual developers from the marketplace. They make a lot of great free visuals, and custom visuals are nice to use when you have to use them. There is no bullet chart equivalent in Power BI like that. It's just, there is nothing native that would do anything close to a bullet chart. Some things similar, but nothing that has the overlaid columns like you would see in this. So those are those cases where, yes, it is good to use custom visuals. I also want to mention kind of a word of caution is because custom visuals are developed by third-party developers, they are put in somewhat of a caged sandbox environment when they load. Native visuals in Power BI, when they load in a web browser, can share resources and assets. So certain common elements and stuff, just to render the visual, as you know, in browser, can be shared across them, so they will render a little bit faster. Each custom visual is sandboxed a bit and isolated for security reasons, just to make sure your data is protected to an extent. And they basically have to load all of their assets by themselves. They can't share them or anything else because of some security reasons that Microsoft has implemented for a good cause, just to be cautious. So they will just run a little bit slower. So if you put nothing but custom visuals in your report's going to render a lot slower in browser than it would just with native visuals. So they're good to use. Use them sparingly when you have to, and there's still a lot of value to be added from them. But be careful not to just cover your report in a whole bunch of custom visuals, because then you will start to hit performance impacts with them. So just kind of a word of caution there for people who just aren't aware of that. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, I think this is a great example of that. I'm not going to get into the weeds of talking about the measures, but I essentially just have two calculations. I've created a regular sales measure, and then the file for this, and I'll just show it briefly. It really is just fairly simple. I'm basically just doing a calculation of my sales amount, and I'm applying an all function to basically remove the filter from class, which is how I'm able to get the class total for that green bar in the back. And that way I can have subtotal versus grand total compared when I actually have the hover effect, because when the filters are being applied, that calculation with the all function is ignoring the class filter, which is why the green bar is going to be taller. And again, it gives a really nice perspective to see how large that slice of the pie is versus the total amount. Are there any questions on the on this tooltip, either with the button header, the smart narrative, or the bullet chart?
No.
Okay.
Not at the moment.
Perfect. I will show the last one. We'll have time, yeah, I'll have time for about one more, and then I think we'll put it up to questions, because I'll put it just about at the 45-minute mark. Let's see. This one. All right. Also along the lines of custom visuals, I think this is a great example of when you can use a native visual to basically achieve the effect of the custom visual that you might be wanting to achieve anyways. So I originally came across this in Google Analytics. There was there was one of these visuals that I saw where it was a heat map by time of day and day of week, and I saw this on their Google's website, and like that's a fantastic visual. I think it's a great way to show the distribution of your data across all of these different quadrants. And from there, it's like, all right, well, okay, I know there's no native heat map visual in Power BI. Let's look at the visual store. So I went to the visual store and pulled that up. There we go. And if I look for a heat map, not quite. There it is, table heat map. But as you can also see, it's very poorly rated down here. It has a couple of other things in it. I mean, but again, this is basically a matrix table. Like I don't actually need a separate visual for this. And I tried it. I just didn't particularly like it. It's been a year, almost 2 years since they've even updated it all. It's a fairly poorly rated app. So all right, then I thought to myself, okay, if it's just basically a table, how do I turn something like this into a heat map that's available in Power BI? And I achieved that actually through some clever use of conditional formatting. So there's actually a way, as I was working through this, that I was able to get that. So I'll kind of walk you through how I turned this visual into the other one. To start with, I just simply applied some background formatting. So going over to page views, conditional formatting, and background color. And let's actually change it up from like red and green, because those are, there's a lot of assumptions people have with bad and good when you use red and green. So unless we really want to call those out, I would prefer something a bit more neutral. So maybe like a light blue to like a darker blue. There we go. Add some gradient in there. Okay, so we're about halfway there. But the thing with the heat map is, the goal of a heat map is not to show the numbers, it's just to show the data. And if I was to come back and looking at the background color, there's no option to show colors only. There's no hide labels or anything like that. I thought through that a bit, and I'm also realizing that one thing you can do with conditional formatting in Power BI is that you can also apply more than one at once. So we have an option to apply background color. We also have an option to apply font color. So if I select font color, oops, there we go, and do the same logic, I'm going to do light blue to dark blue. It achieves the effect that we want. Because I'm applying the same color logic to both the background and the font, it results to this. Now, personally, it would be nice if they just had a some kind of like color formatting in here, and you could just choose background, font, or both. It's the fact that they're two different. I think they should be combined into one. A lot of other tools do that, but it's one of those things that it didn't click until I thought about it for a bit. But we get the effect. It's using a native visual, so it's going to run faster. And if you really need the numbers, you can hover over any of these elements, and you can still get the KPI that will give you the data that you need. So it works, I think, very well. And I think it also helps to get your mind out of the box of thinking that tables just display data. They're not visuals. You can create a lot of visualizations from the matrix and the table visual through the use of conditional formatting. So I think it's a nice way to show the number of unique ways that you can present a matrix table onto a report. And a heat map, I think, is one of my favorite ones to be able to build with that. This one's pretty quick and straightforward. So at this point, what I'll say is open it up to any questions related specifically to the heat map visual, and also general discussions as well around Power BI we can go into now as well.
Everybody's shy today. So I love the last one. So that's really great. I will try it tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you have you basically just you have that X and Y axis of two grids that you want to be able to see where the cross section of highest data points are. Like for me, it's 11 a.m. Wednesday local time. At least at the time when I made this, had like the strongest distribution of people tuning in. So I love the heat map. I think it's a great way to display trends and data.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a nice concept for a conditional formatting of the size of the numbers, but I think that's not possible in Power BI, or?
Not yet. Yeah, someday I'm hoping to, like where you can come in, as you're mentioning, and you could do something where some more of these things start to have the FFX symbols. I'm waiting for that too. Like it would be great if the conditional formatting here started to show up, where you could start to dynamically change basically every single attribute. I think it's going to come at some point. I'm sure either through an external tool or something else, there's going to be ways to be able to click a slicer and have almost any element on the page change.
Yeah. So also I like the button text that you put a measure on it. So I don't be aware of it. So I will try this too. And yeah, I will see how it works. So it's really great. So I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, just basically anytime you ever see that little button with the FFX on there, just know that, ooh, I can dynamically change that. It's basically two places right now you can do it. It's going to be locations that involve text, so like titles, tooltip text. A lot of those you can add a measure into them to make them dynamic, and a lot of locations for color, like in the card, single value cards, the background color will have the FFX symbol next to it. So let's say that number is 8,000. If it ever goes above 10,000, have that background color change to green or to yellow. So you can add a lot of like KPI identifiers all over the report to really guide users when things kind of go above or below certain ranges.
Yeah.
Right. You have a tip for me to create or to put data on a form, or more look like a form. So if you have data in a table and you want to show it like a form, You know what I mean?
That's probably going to be paginated reports if you're wanting more of like printed type material. Yeah, like Power BI is not designed to be like PDF form type scenarios, because it's designed to be clickable and interactive and visually forward. So more traditional like lists and form type stuff, that's paginated reporting, which will be available with the new Power BI Premium per user, the PPU. So if you haven't explored paginated reports yet, it's a lot like SQL Server reporting services, but it gives you that more traditional like form. People use that sometimes to make invoices or a lot of like the document type stuff.
Yeah, but I saw the multi-line card, and I try, but the settings are very limited in that way that I can say, please print every value row by row. It's not really possible.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's not outside of paginated reports, there's not too many things that do print multiple pages or anything like that. If you export to PDF, you get what is seen, but it's not going to scroll through your items or anything like that.
Okay, so we have some other questions from the audience. Don't be shy. I will stop the recording.